Good morning. If modern conflict is increasingly defined by invisible signals, submerged sabotage, and, well, deniable proxies, is the traditional concept of a national border already obsolete?
That is precisely the core operational question we are looking at today. Good morning.
Today is Wednesday, the 10th of June, 2026. Welcome to an objective, fact-based intelligence brief on the current events shaping the European continent and the international security architecture. Today's brief is titled Europe Under Pressure: NATO, Russian Hybrid Threats, and Middle East Spillover.
We are tracking a highly complex operational picture this morning, requiring a really precise examination of intelligence estimates, regional military developments, and, frankly, a fundamental realignment of global strategic postures.
Right. And before we begin our analysis, we must note that this broadcast is brought to you by ProWave AI and is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application. The Stylo News app is the consumer version of the Stylo Intel Ops software.
Which is a vital distinction to make for the audience.
Exactly. We emphasize this distinction because Stylo Intel Ops is utilized for enterprise operations across government, military, and corporate sectors. So, as a listener to this brief, you have unique access to a tool specifically designed to support global decision-makers in navigating this, well, increasingly volatile world.
And the intelligence we will review today is drawn directly from those exact same reporting streams. It ensures an unvarnished, objective look at the data driving international policy.
Right. So our mission today is to examine the primary patterns of events currently unfolding across Europe's eastern, northern, and southern flanks. We will analyze their cascading impacts at the local, national, and international levels.
We will also review the stated perspectives of key decision makers and examine social media sentiment to forecast what events you should watch for next.
Let us look first at the immediate physical borders of the European continent. Based on the intelligence assessments from early June, is there any credible evidence of a conventional armored threat to the eastern flank?
The intelligence assessments remain entirely conclusive on this specific point. There is no credible evidence of an imminent conventional Russian invasion of the Baltic states or Poland.
So the tanks are not massing at the border.
Precisely. The reporting set contains no indicators of the mass mobilization, the staging, or the logistics concentration that would be required for a cross-border ground offensive into NATO territory. I mean, Russia remains heavily committed to its operations in Ukraine.
Right, expending substantial long-range strike capacity and manpower there.
Exactly. So, opening a conventional second front against a unified NATO alliance does not align with their current strategic capability or logic.
Yet, looking at the data, the operational pressure on the eastern flank is severe. I mean, if conventional war is off the table, the strategy has clearly shifted to active, adaptive, asymmetric threats actions well below the threshold of open conflict.
That is an accurate assessment of the mechanism at play. It is a calculated strategy.
It is effectively a geopolitical pressure cooker. They are tapping on the pressure valves, jamming a signal here, flying a drone there, just to see how much steam NATO will let escape before someone actually reaches for the alarm.
Yes. The asymmetric toolkit currently deployed is designed to be disruptive, but ultimately deniable. For example, we are tracking persistent GPS jamming and spoofing, primarily originating from the Kaliningrad Oblast.
And for context, Kaliningrad is not just a random territory. It is a highly militarized Russian exclave sandwiched entirely between NATO members Poland and Lithuania, right on the Baltic Sea.
Right.
It essentially acts as a stationary, heavily armed aircraft carrier right in the middle of the alliance.
Precisely. And from that specific position, they are projecting electronic warfare. It is crucial to understand the mechanism here, because unlike simple jamming, which merely blocks a signal and creates a dead zone,
spoofing is far more insidious.
Exactly. Spoofing transmits a stronger, counterfeit satellite signal. It tricks an aircraft or a ship's navigation system into believing it is miles off course, or that it is flying at a completely different altitude.
And this is currently affecting civil aviation and maritime navigation in the Baltic region. I mean, when applied to commercial airliners in a highly congested airspace, the risk of a catastrophic miscalculation rises exponentially.
It does. And beyond the invisible electronic threats, we are seeing physical manifestations of this strategy. The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs has documented a clear pattern of proxy-enabled arson, sabotage, and the mapping of undersea infrastructure across Western Europe.
We saw a stark example of this physical risk just recently, on the 29th of May, when a marine drone exploded in the NATO port of Galaia, Romania. And this was not a minor incident.
No, it was significant.
It triggered local evacuations, forced a heightened security posture and actually prompted direct warnings from the United States to Russia. Moscow naturally demanded proof of attribution.
Well, the demand for attribution is the cornerstone of hybrid warfare. I mean, a marine drone in the Black Sea can very easily be framed as an accidental spillover from the ongoing naval combat in Ukraine.
Rather than a deliberate attack on Romanian sovereignty.
Exactly. It completely exploits the ambiguity of intent. Meanwhile, we are tracking Ukrainian long-range drone strikes moving in the opposite direction, hitting the St. Petersburg oil terminal and a Baltic Fleet corvette in dry dock at the Kronstadt naval base.
And those strikes into northwestern Russia require a reach of 900 to 1,100 kilometers into Russia's strategic rear. That is a massive geographic expansion of unmanned strike operations.
It fundamentally alters the map, and it seems highly probable that a state absorbing strikes that deep into its territory will seek indirect hybrid retaliation against the European states it perceives as facilitating those capabilities.
That is the working intelligence assumption. The strategic rear is simply no longer secure for either side. And this dynamic extends directly to the northern flank as well. The Arctic theater is showing distinct signs of strain.
Yes, particularly regarding the Kola Peninsula.
We have reviewed explicit warnings from both Norwegian and United Kingdom defense circles regarding to the Russian military buildup there. I mean, the Kola Peninsula is essentially the center of gravity for Russia's northern fleet.
Right, housing their strategic nuclear submarines and layered air defense networks. The primary concern articulated in the intelligence is the potential for Russia to contest what is known as the Bear Gap.
And that is the strategic maritime and air choke point between the Barents Sea and the Norwegian Sea.
Correct. For Russian submarines to reach the open Atlantic to threaten vital supply lines, they must pass through this gap. So we are observing increased activity designed to map Western underwater sensors in this area and to test the response times of NATO maritime patrols.
I must press on the strategic calculus of the alliance here. How does NATO practically distinguish a mere probe, like a drone overflight in Romania or a GPS spoofing incident over Lithuania, from an outright attack that would trigger an Article 5 collective defense response?
Well, NATO relies heavily on a threshold of attribution and scale. And the current adversary actions are meticulously calibrated to stay just millimeters below that line.
Because an Article 5 response requires an armed attack that threatens the territorial integrity or political independence of a member state.
Right. Electronic warfare is highly disruptive, but it is fundamentally non-kinetic. A singular drone explosion is kinetic, but it lacks the scale of a coordinated military offensive.
So the alliance is forced to look for cumulative damage.
Exactly. The strategy against NATO right now is death by 1,000 cuts, purposefully avoiding the single decisive blow that would unify an armed response.
And the impacts of this approach are certainly measurable across the continent. Locally, we see the immediate physical disruptions, like the evacuations in Romania. In Latvia, the Adazi military base is rapidly pivoting to host NATO counter-drone summits.
They are attempting to compress the procurement timeline to deploy defenses against these evolving unmanned systems.
Nationally, Poland is operating under a state of chronic readiness, frequently scrambling its fighter aircraft to secure its airspace during large-scale Russian strike waves near its borders. I mean, this elevates pilot fatigue, strains maintenance supply chains, and significantly increases the risk of a mid-air miscalculation.
Internationally, the result is a heightened, permanent alert posture across the entire alliance. It has forced a renewed and incredibly urgent focus on accelerating European defense infrastructure, which, frankly, has languished in many nations since the end of the Cold War.
And this immense strain on resources brings us to the southern flank. While the physical borders in the east and north face direct hybrid pressure, external conflicts in the Middle East are acting as a massive force multiplier.
Yes, the Mediterranean is experiencing a severe secondary impact from the instability in the Levant and the Gulf.
The intelligence assesses that a direct conventional military attack from Iran or its proxy networks on southern European territory remains highly unlikely.
That is correct. The primary pattern is one of an indirect systemic threat. However, the downstream effects of Middle Eastern instability are currently registering as a high-level operational risk to NATO's southern border.
The facts on the ground involve sustained friction. I mean, we are tracking United States defensive strikes on radar sites, such as those near Iran's Qasem Island. We see continuous missile and drone intercepts over Kuwait and sustained escalating kinetic exchanges between Israel and Hezbollah.
Right.
But I want to connect the dots for our listeners.
Yeah.
Why does a drone intercept over Kuwait or a strike on Qasem Island directly impact a port in Italy or Spain?
The impacts are primarily economic and logistical, and they are driven by risk assessment. The Strait of Hormuz is a vital artery for global energy markets. So when military friction occurs in the Gulf, maritime insurance conglomerates immediately adjust their risk models.
They either refuse coverage for commercial vessels entering the region or raise premiums to unsustainable levels.
Precisely. And shipping companies are then forced to reroute their massive container ships entirely around the Cape of Good Hope.
Which adds weeks to the transit time, burns exponentially more fuel, and completely disrupts the scheduling at major European destination ports.
Creating massive supply chain backlogs across the continent, yes. Simultaneously, European nations like Italy, Spain, and France are forced to deploy their naval assets eastward to the Red Sea and the Gulf to protect the shipping that does remain.
And that diversion of naval assets leaves fewer resources available to patrol the Mediterranean exactly when they are needed most.
Exactly. And that brings us to the migration impacts. We have intelligence regarding an active, professionally facilitated migration route capitalizing on this exact instability.
Right. Reports detail an Iraqi-run smuggling network moving individuals from the Middle East through Turkey, Greece, Bulgaria, France, and into the United Kingdom. And this is not a chaotic, disorganized movement of people.
No, not at all. The intelligence highlights that these networks are utilizing forged documents, encrypted messaging apps, and social media coordination to route migrants.
So when kinetic instability spikes in the Levant or the Gulf, displacing civilian populations, these existing professional networks act as immediate conduits.
They do. They route the flow toward the nearest stable shores, which inherently means Italy, Greece, and Spain. Therefore, a drone intercept over the Gulf functions as an immediate logistical, economic, and border security tax on southern Europe.
It is a profound two-front strain on the continent: hybrid military pressure in the east and north, and complex socioeconomic and maritime pressure in the south.
Right.
This cascading pressure ultimately lands on the desks of political leaders, forcing a divergence in how the international community responds. We observe two highly divergent strategic directions among key allies, which we will analyze impartially here.
First, the position of the United States under the Trump administration highlights a continued strategic pivot toward the Indo-Pacific theater.
Right. This involves a planned reduction in United States military brigades permanently stationed in Europe, coupled with explicit demands for greater financial burden sharing by European allies.
And in direct response to this shifting posture, there is a strong, organized push for European strategic autonomy. Germany is actively convening what is being termed an E5 summit.
Bringing together the leadership of Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Poland.
Yes, to formulate a cohesive, independent European defense strategy, ostensibly to prepare for a scenario where American security guarantees are less comprehensive.
Yet, we are simultaneously tracking United States negotiations underway right now to deploy new nuclear weapons to Poland and Eastern Europe. How do European nations aggressively build military independence while simultaneously preparing to host new American nuclear deployments on their soil? Is a striking strategic paradox.
It is the defining contradiction of the current European security architecture. I mean, European leaders are attempting to build an independent conventional military capacity, investing heavily in domestic drone manufacturing, artillery production, and cyber defenses.
Preparing for a future with fewer American troops on the ground.
Exactly. Yet the ultimate security umbrella remains nuclear deterrence. That is a capability Europe simply cannot rapidly scale independently to match Russia.
Therefore, they are forced to rely on the United States for the absolute highest level of strategic deterrence, while simultaneously attempting to decouple at the tactical and operational levels.
The perspectives of the key decision makers really reflect the strain of this dual-track strategy. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, maintains a firm Atlanticist posture. He pushes for strict alliance cohesion, viewing NATO specifically with heavy United States involvement as the vital and irreplaceable defensive shield for the continent.
Conversely, voices like Yanis Varoufakis, the former Greek finance minister, are publicly advocating for the complete dissolution of NATO. He argues that the alliance fundamentally hinders the development of a true, independent European defense union that serves European rather than American strategic and economic interests.
We also track the perspective of Turkey, which occupies a highly critical geostrategic position on the southern flank, essentially bridging Europe and the Middle East.
Right. Numan Kurtulmus, Speaker of the Grand National Assembly, emphasizes Turkey's role as an independent regional mediator. He advocates for a completely new global political architecture, signaling deep dissatisfaction with the current Western-led international framework.
We must also impartially report the stated perspective of Russian President Vladimir Putin. He explicitly and consistently denies any intention to launch an attack on NATO territory.
The Kremlin officially labels Western fears of a Russian invasion as deliberate provocations, manufactured by Western defense establishments just to justify increased defense spending and the rearmament of European nations.
Looking at the data from X, formerly Twitter, it seems public sentiment is not just anxious, it is practically fracturing under the weight of these contradictions.
We see highly polarized discussions, significant distrust of political leadership across the spectrum, and widespread fears of escalation.
Yes, the sentiment analysis reveals deep anxieties regarding internal stability. Discussions heavily feature alarmist hashtags surrounding Operation Jihad Europe, reflecting acute public fears about migration, domestic security, and a perceived loss of state control over borders.
The prevailing sentiment leans heavily toward a belief that systemic instability is taking permanent root. But surely this polarization is not uniform across all issues. Our analysis identified a surprisingly broad area of common agreement amidst the political division.
Indeed, the data shows that despite deep political divisions regarding immigration policy or the role of the United States, there is a strong, unified, and positive sentiment across Europe supporting the consolidation of the domestic defense industry.
The public overwhelmingly supports increased research and development in military technology.
We are tracking a notable surge in positive sentiment specifically surrounding venture capital investment in European defense tech startups. The public appears to view technological self-reliance not as a political choice, but as a mandatory adaptation to the current threat environment.
Based on these established patterns, the intelligence estimates, and the stated positions of decision-makers, we must look ahead. What should listeners monitor in the coming weeks and months?
Well, the intelligence consensus advises monitoring for continued cumulative hybrid pressures rather than a sudden, massive armored maneuver. Expect a steady, deliberate increase in localized airspace incidence drones, briefly crossing borders, or commercial airspace violations that test response times.
More critically, monitor for sophisticated cyber campaigns specifically targeting European telecommunications and energy grids.
The recent deployment of the Atlas R8 malware against European targets by actors linked to the Chinese state is a prime example of this vulnerability.
And Atlas RAT is a remote access Trojan. It does not just steal data, it establishes a persistent, hidden backdoor within the administrative layers of a network. The strategic value here is prepositioning.
Exactly. By embedding this malware in critical infrastructure now, foreign adversaries gain the capability to disrupt or completely black out a European energy grid or telecom network in the future, should a geopolitical crisis escalate.
It is the perfect hybrid weapon, offering maximum disruption with high deniability. Furthermore, watch for rapid adaptations in unmanned aerial vehicle tactics, as both sides of the Ukraine conflict innovate and iterate drone technology at an industrial pace.
From a diplomatic and strategic standpoint, the critical venue to watch is the upcoming NATO Leaders Summit, scheduled for the 7th and 8th of July, 2026, in Ankara, Turkey.
That summit will be the focal point where these divergent strategies collide. It is the physical venue where the clash between United States reduction policies and European autonomy efforts must be negotiated.
Watch closely how the financial burden sharing is structured there, and how the alliance manages the internal friction over the command and control of new European defense initiatives.
Finally, monitor the acceleration of European defense procurement. Specifically, watch for structural shifts away from dependency on massive United States defense contractors, moving toward agile regional collaboration and internal manufacturing.
The drone coalition, currently operating out of Latvia to pool resources and rapidly scale unmanned systems, is the exact prototype for this new model of European military integration.
As the pressure remains constant on all flanks, European adaptation in the defense technology sector will be the most tangible metric of their strategic shift. So we leave you with this final thought. If modern conflict is increasingly defined by long-range drone strikes, stealth cyber attacks pre-positioning in civilian power grids, and undersea infrastructure sabotage actions that deliberately and carefully stay below the threshold of open war, is the traditional 20th century concept of territorial defense becoming obsolete?
It is the defining question that every defense ministry on the continent is currently being forced to answer, and the solutions they arrive at will absolutely reshape the global security architecture.
This concludes our Objective Intelligence Brief for today. We remind you that this broadcast is generated by Stylo News, Stylo News is a mobile and computer application that individuals can download and fully customize to receive personal intelligence-style briefs just like this one.
The application curates vital information from hundreds of traditional news sources and social media platforms like X, delivering the data you need to stay informed and understand the mechanics behind the headlines.
We urge you to subscribe and get AI-powered news on demand by visiting www.stylonews.com. Join us this Friday for the next Stylo News Intel update. Our strategic debate topic will be East Africa.
We look forward to it.
And, all right, dropping the formal news desk persona for a second. Thank you guys so much for spending your morning with us. We know there is a wealth of information out there, and we genuinely appreciate you letting us help you unpack the complexities of these events. If you have a topic you are insanely curious about and want us to do a deep dive on, please drop us a request. Don't forget to follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms to keep the conversation going. Have a great Wednesday, and we will catch you on Friday.